Hello, I'm Dr. Shiza Mohsin, and you are with me on Dil Ki Recipes on your favorite social media platform. This is your source of professional and culturally informed support for you and your Desi family. I am your relationship expert and coach on life and relationships. I'm hoping to share some resources, sanity checks with you over time through these videos, reels, podcasts, whatever is your preferred way of consuming this information. And the most important reason, my view, is so you know you're not alone in this journey. So if you identify as a Desi with cultural roots in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and surrounding areas, trying to meet your life and expectations and relationship needs and desires while embracing some beautiful elements of your culture, Dil Ki Recipes is for you. Today's episode is focusing on the experience of a typical Desi teenager. So many people talk about teenage, middle school, high school in the West being a really, really tough time. And so today, to help me talk about this, I have the wonderful, wonderful Zara, who is a 22-year-old Pakistani American from upstate New York, and definitely shares the commitment that I need on this screen in this podcast to destigmatizing conversations about mental health. Zara, welcome, and thank you so much for talking with me about this.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
And I am so appreciative of you because I remember a few years ago when you were in high school and I had written my book, you had interviewed me on my book and we did a podcast together.
Yeah, that was back during COVID. That's when we got to know each other a little bit better. And it was something, South Asian mental health was something I had been thinking about a lot at the time. And then I read your book and I was like, wow, there are real words for what I'm trying to see, what I'm experiencing. And again, it helps a lot to know that you're not alone.
Thank you so much. That's so validating for me, Zara, because as I come across Desi teens, I notice the pain, the angst, the confusion. There's just so much that we need to clarify. And, as parents, as older young adults, there's definitely a part where we need to contribute. So the incoming generation finds it a little bit easier, if you may. So I would love your help in talking about some key things because there's so many elements of teenage that are tough, let alone being a bicultural kid that struggles with so many of those identity related things. So I'd love for you to take the lead, talk about whatever it is that you are noticing about this population, given you're a little bit more far removed from it. So I'm hoping it's going to help you have perspective and put me in the hot seat. Let's talk about this.
Yeah. Okay. So I've had to reflect back on being a teenager is so hard. And I didn't want to reflect back because I am at a place where I feel like I've moved beyond a lot of mental health challenges that are related to my identity. But I think that just means we should talk about them. I think the biggest one that I felt like talking about because people didn't want to talk about it was difficulty fitting in high school and middle school when you're a teenager, particularly because it's not a uniquely Desi teenager problem. I think everybody feels that about that stage, that really awkward stage in your life. But I think that it shows up differently, and you can let me know in what ways it shows up and how us and our support systems are prepared to deal with the mental health challenges that come out of that. We don't typically know. Our parents didn't experience the same thing. So I'd be interested to hear from your perspective, how is it different from a normal American teenager, if there's any such thing, for Desi teenagers to experience difficulty fitting in?
You're putting me right on the spot, aren't you? I will tell you that is probably one of the most challenging phases. That cultural teenage is tough anyways. I notice, especially with us as a community, the immigrant population. So I'm going to put onus on us adults, and then I will share perspective and tell me what you think. But one of the key missing links that most of us have, unless we're second and third generation, is that we haven't experienced teenage here. Right? So we have like this Desi auntie experience or uncle experience back home, whether it's India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. We never had to deal with being in an environment when you're unsure of yourself, where everyone is different from you. We were lucky to be in an environment where everyone was pretty much the same. At the time I was growing up, we were not as conscious of socioeconomic wealth. We were not as informed about religiosity and the denominations being different. We were just a bunch of kids growing up. But you realize the power of being a majority in a country versus being a minority. So I think that Desi teen kids have such a difficult time, and it's such a hard time for them. And I don't think as adults we do a good job of supporting those emotions and even being there for them. So I'm not justifying the adult behavior, but one of the Desi things I notice when I do parenting sessions with parents is a Desi parent, the moment they think there's a problem, we try to fix and solve. We're not hearing the experience. So we have a Desi kid who's trying to fit in. They're already feeling the otherness because they're not a typical kid. Their household is not the same. Their parents don't interact even with the school system the same way. And so helping their parents understand, it's almost like, how so many times I've heard this, Zara, and you can tell me to stop anytime, that when somebody goes to a Desi therapist, they don't have to explain their story. So it's just so much more powerful to have therapy with someone who belongs to your culture. So I make the opposite reference when I say American bicultural kids of Pakistani Indian descent, when they go to their parents, it's almost like they have to educate their parents about the education and school system before they can get any empathy, support, solution. So it's so taxing for them to even explain the situation that their parents really are clueless about, that getting help becomes, oh my God, let me just not, you won't understand.
I agree. I think there's a disconnect. I think you can feel like the rules are different, and sort of the third culture problem that there are rules for how to be when you're at school. There's rules for how to be when you're at home. And sometimes there's a crossover, like you are trying to go to a party or something that your parents don't want you to go to because there will be boys there. But it's a birthday party or something that you are expected as a good friend to show up for. And you have to navigate both sides of your life and kind of be able to communicate with your friends that this is what their expectations are of me and this is what I want to do to respect that, and then also communicating with your parents to say, this is important to me and I want to do that as well. How do you sort of see both sides of that communication and being able to handle that?
I think it's such a hard thing, I will tell you, because as I suggest what should be done, I'm also very aware that it's just a kid. It's a middle schooler, a high schooler trying to fit in, trying to go to this party because all their friends will be there. And worse, if they don't go, they will be the quiet one who has no conversation to contribute to the next day during lunch and recess, because everybody will be talking about that party. So by virtue of the parents not allowing them to go, they've already kind of slighted them with these experiences, right? So it's a tough thing. And I'm not defending the parent, because the goal of this podcast is really for both sides to understand each other. When you're an immigrant and you come to this country, the perspective is that you lose everything and you leave a lot behind. But what you bring over is a collection of values that then becomes a source of pride for you if you're, so there's this romanticizing of this idea that you, Zara, if you show up in a shalwar kameez, or if you are saying Salaam alaikum and making chai for the aunties, will make me so proud if I'm your mother, because I'm showing up in the decorum of the cultural values that I brought with me. And it's sometimes crazy because you guys were not born and raised back home. So having that unreasonable expectation can be really tough.
Well, the thing that came to my mind when you were talking about the next day at lunch with the party, if we're continuing with this imaginary scenario that I'm sure was all too real for many of us, is that what usually ends up happening is that the kid will sneak out or find a way to go to the party anyway and say they're at study group, and you take a change of clothes, you're wearing sweatpants over your little skirt, and I'm not at all recalling a moment where I did that.
Of course not.
Never. That was never me. I think that is why I thought this was a very important issue, because the trouble fitting in and then not having a support system that knows how to go through that with you, or you yourself not knowing how to go through it because the way you're experiencing it is different from the way people around you are experiencing it, becomes very isolating. And I think we have with technology, I think that's just a general problem that we're all very used to isolating ourselves, and that leads to greater mental health challenges like depression. And
I so appreciate you saying that. And so this would be something I would be saying to the parents of teenagers. please consider talking to your kids and finding middle ground. There is a middle ground. There's some form of negotiation, some better, maybe promises that can be made and commitments of responsibility, but outright abandoning the idea of your child participating in those social events really contributes to their mental well-being not being healthy and isolates them. The other dangerous thing of continuing to be rigid in those areas, Zara, is children stop coming to you for help, right? Because they feel like you won't understand. And there are times like kids are going to need their parents. But if that space is shut because there's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of rules, then things will be happening. And so the child is actually increasing their vulnerability from a safety perspective, from a mental health perspective, from all those perspectives, you know? It's like there is no buffer, there is no support system. So if you are a kid who's struggling with that, figure out a way to talk to your parents. I know that it's not easy, but you know, a grown-up needs to be a part of those situations so you have a backup. And I understand. I wish I could say that there's a magic wand and there's a magic formula. There isn't, because every family is different, right? But I completely agree with what you're saying, Zara. It's very isolating. It's very painful for kids. And they're going through a tough time anyways.
Yeah. I'm an eldest child and I had younger cousins growing up with me too. And I didn't feel like there was anything to look at. Like, how is there an ideal way for me to communicate with my parents about these issues? Is there a way where we can make this work? Or I think it's one thing to say that we should communicate, and it's one thing to, how can we imagine this communication? How can we imagine this scenario of coming to a middle ground? Because I think that the way parents communicate with their children as well, if you're used to doing it a certain way in a certain cultural context, it's also hard to imagine having to have a discussion over whether you can go to prom or a birthday party when those wouldn't have necessarily been the same discussion in another context.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, so the baby step I will recommend, and then I'll tell you where it's coming from. A lot of Desi kids, you know, we're that sandwich generation where our parents were not the most equipped with good parenting skills. So we have this illusion that we are better parents than our parents was, because our parents were like very, very regimented and strict in their positioning, to where I would say majority of the kids were experiencing the same kind of unreasonable parents. Now you're in the United States of America. They're very good parents here, and the rules of the game are different. So here you have, you know, quite a few friends who are going and who have reasonable parents and so you have this frame of reference to say, hey, this person is able to do it and I'm not. So the population of people who are in distress, like the Desi kid, are like the 5 Desi kids who are in distress. Everybody else seems to be okay. All the other 30. So, you know, you're automatically, a space is created for othering, a space is created for the kid to feel like, you know, okay, here's one more way I don't fit in because I don't have those memories. I don't have those experiences. So I understand the pain. The baby first step is for the parents to actually take a pause, because what they are battling is fear. And the inheritance of a bad habit that we have is that the moment we're asked for anything that is uncomfortable, the answer is no, nope, we're not doing it. Because we've heard that. We've grown up around it. So recalibrating and reprogramming our minds. So parents, this one is for you. Just really checking in to see, is this serving my relationship with my kid well? Is this hampering my communication with my teenager? Because they're going to start hiding and we're not going to know, which is a lot more dangerous. And so what can we do to form a middle ground? And of course, you know, there are workshops for this kind of stuff, but I just want this space to be the beginning of the realization and awareness that this happens. And there are kids who are really struggling.
I think that Desi parents care a lot. I think that there's sometimes, we talked about this, sometimes kids can feel like there are a lot of expectations, and that if you don't meet all of them, you are not given the same level of care and love and whatever from your parents. I'll give a small example. I remember of the rules being different, of not fitting in, of everything. This is all in one. I was in middle school. I had just transferred, and I was maybe like one of very few people of color. I don't remember any other South Asian kids with me, actually. I remember this kid talking about how he was going to get a flat screen TV in his room if he got a C on his report card. And I just remember thinking to myself, I don't remember ever getting anything less than A's. And what did I get? I was like, I don't even think we went out for ice cream. I told my parents, and they were like, you should be getting A's. What do you want? I was like, I want ice cream. They're like, okay, like there's nothing wrong with that. I don't know that they saw it as a celebration for good grades or just they also wanted to get ice cream. But I recognized that I wasn't part of that structure. And to a certain extent, I wanted to be, while also recognizing that the expectations that my parents had of me are different. And I think from a teenage perspective, I would encourage everyone to get a little creative. And I wouldn't say like lower your expectations, but just be creative about how you can feel like you're part of things.
That's so beautiful. I will tell you that traditionally, South Asians have a notorious reputation for pushing kids into an academic track, very like medicine, law, banking, all the glorified, very predictable careers. And I just want to let whoever teenager is hearing this know that I know it's really hard because you're just, there are all these expectations. And then when you don't meet them, there's disappointment. And there's a lot of transference of those immigrant expectations where parents want to live vicariously through their children. So it's like, okay, well, I couldn't do this, but my child is going to become a doctor. Well, not every kid is designed for that. And so finding any happy place looks like a compromise, whereas it would be just the creative space of like, okay, well, I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do to earn a living, and also the great part, it was hilarious because I don't know if you know of, like many years ago, I want to say more than 10 years ago, when social media just started, there was this comedian who had something Ali, his name was, I don't remember, but he'd have like these reels and he would talk about like B for bakwas, B for battamiz, B for bewakoof for grades that, if you got anything
Yeah.
A, that was like not acceptable. So there's a lot of that pressure, and I'm glad you brought it up because I want to acknowledge that. And, my recommendation for parents would be to really, really understand their child and what their strengths are before they start pushing them into those spaces where they may feel like they're set up for failure.
So where I'm at right now is I think we've talked about spaces and situations where teenagers are pushing the boundaries or trying to see where the boundaries exist for them in relation to everybody else that they're around. But then also how it even feels like a bad word, honestly, establishing boundaries. It's not, but it's such a contested thing among us. And should we have boundaries? What are boundaries except distance between my love for you? And
Ah, as a representative of the Desi parenting group, I want to hide under the table now because I know that the parenting population in the Desi community, we're not as healthy about boundaries. And, it's so funny because a couple of times I opened, and please know that, and here I am talking about it on social media, accidentally opened my kid's mail. And I got the lecture of my life on, how that is so inappropriate. And I was laughing. Of course, I didn't do that again. But when my mom had done that, and I remember telling her, like, why did you open my mail? And she was like, to kya hua? Like, there was nothing, not even a realization that there was some invasion of privacy. So privacy is one element of boundaries, and also boundary setting. It's a very alien concept because our culture is collective. So it encourages codependence and enmeshment, and we're all one, all for one for all. If you're hurting, I'm hurting. So there's like a positive in there from a support system perspective, but it can be very unhealthy. So setting boundaries, I would say, I would tell teenagers and young adults, do it gently because you're dealing with a person who doesn't understand that. And it's not like they have malicious intent. They really don't know what that means because they haven't experienced that in their family of origin. They may be experiencing that a little bit in their marriages, in their homes, and understanding the value of that in their life in general. Otherwise, you feel like your life is controlled by everyone else. So just be gentle and know that parents are coming from a very novice, unexposed population when it comes to setting boundaries. But it is so important and healthy for the human being to do that. Now, were there any particular areas that come to mind when you ask me about boundaries and Desi kids and Desi families?
There are so many. And I actually, someone told me recently, Desi, obviously, I don't believe in boundaries.
I love it.
We've taken it to be a faith thing now. It's something you believe in or you don't believe in. I guess I will elaborate. I think one that Hassan Minhaj recently discussed in his comedy special that felt universally relatable was not being able to lock your door, your bedroom door in your parents' house. There's such drama when that happens. I don't know why I wanted to lock, like I didn't think about it ever. I was like, there's no reason for me to lock my door. But then it's also like if someone walks in when you're changing, they don't knock. Like there's a lot of things, especially like as you're getting older, that start to feel less comfortable, or that there should be boundaries, or there's greater boundaries for you with the opposite sex than there are, and then there's no boundaries with any of the women in your life. I also think career wise and in terms of things that like college and activities and jobs and professional experiences, and even dating, I think there's a lot of ways that people have trouble communicating boundaries or even feeling like they have the ability to have them.
You have touched on something so common in the Desi community. I will tell you a memory that comes up for me is my older sister was a rebellious one and would go and, be out and was perpetually getting in trouble about doing that. But her favorite part of the end of her evening was, and I was like the dork who was studying in her room, and I was a middle schooler maybe, was that she would come back to my room to give me the whole account of what she was doing. Because she needed that audience. And then suddenly, in the middle of our conversation, she would go towards my door, like she's almost sneaking. And then she would suddenly open it, and my mother would come rolling in because I would never know that my mom had like her ear to the door because she was trying to get intel and she figured out that my sister would do that. So that whole opening the door and, just completely like no sense of privacy is such a culturally nuanced bad habit that the culture inherits. Unfortunately for the Desi community, and hopefully Desi parents are listening to it, we feel that a way to show closeness is by violating boundaries. So we would never behave this way if it was a friend, if it was like all the tameez and the respect shows up like in 2 seconds. But when it's our own, whether it's our child, our spouse, it's one of our own, that's where you violate it. And that basically symbolizes that we're close because I don't have to knock the door. I don't have to, whereas that's common human courtesy, but I see that all the time. Like, partners in relationship will talk to each other with disrespect and no problem because they're partners. They would never talk to anybody like that. So boundaries are violated in multiple ways on multiple levels, and our culture is really not as informed about them.
What would you say? Because I think what stops Desi teenagers from also feeling like they can set boundaries, even if they think that well, it's one thing feeling like, okay, can I have boundaries? Do they exist for me? Or is this another thing that like the flat screen in my TV or in my room is just not my reality? I think it's one thing to get past that and say, okay, I need to not. I used to take meetings during COVID. I was working remotely in my room and no one would knock. Everyone would just barge in and I would just have such a fright. I would jump out of my chair because my earbuds were in and it would be someone dropping a plate of fresh fruit on my like it was a very loving gesture, but I was like, I can't have this constant anxiety that someone is going to jump in and kind of ruin this professional experience that I'm having for the first time. And I think another part of that is of us not communicating those things is fear of how it'll be received, of how like saying, I don't want the cut fruit. You never say that. You can't ever say that. It's like a direct rejection of someone's love or fear of, I think, again, disappointing in the sense that you're not able to deal with that as well as other people who grew up with that being part of the culture more normally and didn't know anything different were able to deal with that.
I will tell you that one of the things that comes to mind as you were saying that is that, a big, big learning curve, and I will invite everyone, teenagers and parents, is what I call the culturally appropriate language skills. And I know it may sound really silly, but our messages get misunderstood constantly. So, like you said, how do you tell your loved one, I don't want the cut fruit. I don't want the carbs you're giving me. I don't want the paratha. Like, please. It's like, how do you say no to that? Because it comes with so much love. And there are a couple of love languages that I add to a Desi, list of love languages. And one of them is
Please tell me.
yeah, so there are two more. And there's
Mhm.
one for marriage and one for, regular relationships. And one of them is food. It's like if your parent might not say, I love you as often as they'll say, kya khaogi, kya khana hai, kya pakaun. So, the whole idea about food, I mean, there's like, I'm offering love and you just rejected my love. So knowing how to talk to your parent, culturally informed. A lot of times when I do sessions with clients who are in their 20s and 30s, I'm teaching them how to communicate with their in-laws because you don't care as much about your parents because they're safe. They will still love you even if you mess up, but you have to walk on eggshells when it comes to building that relationship with in-laws. And so I'm always giving them culturally appropriate language, and there's like this shock value where like the American born 20 some 30 some is going, Shiza, I had no idea this is what it means. I've heard my mother-in-law say this so often. I'm like, this is how you say it. And then I'll get a report back saying, oh my God, it worked. Similarly, to the older person, I'll be teaching them, this is what you need to say. Because remember, there's a huge gap in communication in those culturally appropriate statements. So parents struggle with telling their child they love them. Instead, they have this very, very intense word vomit, which should mean that we love you, but the child is going, oh my God, like, what are they talking about? And you're downloading it literally, whereas there's a lot of symbolism in South Asian cultural language. So you have this question mark on your face. I know we have a few minutes left, but I wanted to make sure that I check in with you and then we can go on to the next.
I think also, well, I gave you this example. I'll give it now as well, because this sort of made me realize it was a how far we've come moment, actually, that I was on the phone with my dad and he was giving me things to do, people to talk to, because I'm looking for jobs right now. And I am working part-time, I'm in school, I'm really more busy than I've ever been in my life. He was calling me on his drive to work, and then he got out to put in gas, and then he called me back again just because he wanted to talk to me. And I was like, this is so cute, but I cannot keep up this conversation right now because I noticed every time I'm off the phone with him, I have a tummy ache because I've realized that there are 20 more things to my never ending to-do list that I've put on that didn't necessarily need to be on there, that aren't top priority, but I know that they will feel like top priority because he said them. So I told him very gently, I was like, I love that you call me so much. I love that we're talking. It's so nice. But I was like, we can't, like, can we talk about something else? Because I told him, I was like, my tummy hurts when we hang up the phone. And I like have a lot going on right now. And he started laughing because he knows, I don't know if it's a South Asian thing, the tummy hurting with things, the physical symptoms of anxiety, the headache, the tension, the
Yes, I will tell you. So, a lot of times, parents, and what a beautiful example you gave because you nailed it in setting a boundary and lovingly refusing an offering. So, what happens is a lot of times, and it doesn't sound like it happened in your case, but such a beautiful example of setting a boundary, but also knowing your limitation and knowing how to communicate that with a parent. So Desi parents know how to love a few ways. The three most common and usually ineffective ways are food. Ye kha lo, there's always like this food thing.
I
Kya
think that's
khao?
pretty effective. She's like,
It depends. It
okay, that's
depends.
fair. That's fair.
When you're
I'll take
when
it
you're
though.
trying to be healthy and lose weight, you're gonna be
Oh, yeah.
attacked for eating And then when you don't eat, you're going to be told, "Baad mein karna diet, abhi ye kha lo." So, it depends on the situation.
No,
Food.
that's so true.
The second one is advice. So anytime a child shares discomfort, it's like, I'm going to go in with like 20 things you can do, 20 things you should do, and 20 things you must consider to do. So the child, instead of feeling supported, feels overwhelmed because they're not ready. All they're looking for is empathy, somebody to listen to them, somebody to like give them a break. But the barrage of advice. Then the third one is coming from a place of fear. So projecting all and dumping all your fears to your child is also a love language. So this is how the parent is telling you how much they love you. They don't want you to suffer. They don't want you to hurt. So they want to try everything. If it were up to a Desi parent or any parent, I would think they would put you in a box and put a camera on it. And then you would move in that box and they would be watching the camera all the time to make sure that you're fine. I know it's like an extreme description, but this is what we're dealing with. So this is parenting unfortunate moments of like great opportunity of setting boundaries. You did that in such a loving way that your dad laughed. Now, if you were to like lose your marbles, then it would be a different dad going, but I'm only trying to help and you're not listening to.
Yeah. And I think I've definitely had those moments where I was like, why does he keep like nagging me? I mean, sometimes you wish there was a dictionary for these types of things. And I'm so glad that we have a way to talk about them now because the advice portion or the solution oriented portion of parenting, I think I just started to pick up eventually, like you become very good at reading between the lines. Um, and picking up on patterns. I think I was able to make the boundary gently because I knew what he was like, I want you to have all these opportunities. I want you to do the best that you can possibly do. And here's how I'm going to help you. So I knew that that was where it was coming from. So I knew better how to address it as opposed to feeling like he's not on my side. He's trying to make my life harder. He's setting all these expectations I can't meet. And I think I was just thinking back, I was like 5 years ago, maybe even less than that. I don't think I would have been able to have that conversation because in my head, I would have been feeling like if I said I couldn't handle it, that was like showing a weakness or making like feeling like I was not up to the A's on the report card kind of level that I was expected to be at and that I was being disappointing somehow.
Absolutely. And remember, a lot of the disappointment and fears about that also stem from feeling a lot of love. So feeling guilty if you're not able to, come through. Because it's like, oh my God, I'm so privileged. I get so much love. And now I'm going to feel guilty if I don't deliver what the expectation is. So setting and meeting expectation becomes a tough one as well, for sure. Tell me, any last minute things are we talked about a lot of important things. We talked about fitting into the American culture as a teenager, their plight, the idea of setting boundaries with parents in general, and understanding the cultural history behind it, as well as setting expectations and or noticing how you're feeling like you might disappoint a parent. Those are all very, very critical things. I want to make sure that I check in with you on anything else because we will probably have a follow-up episode on other issues that come up regarding teens. But tell me anything else that we can also talk about before we wrap it up.
I mean, just given who we're speaking to, I would just very sincerely like to say things do get better. And like speaking from someone in my early 20s, I feel that things have gotten better. And part of it, I realized, so Hassan Minaj also said this in his special. And I thought it was so funny because it's something my dad said to me when I was about to graduate high school. And it's so interesting that we're all like eventually on the same wavelength. As you mentioned, they see parents or if you are immigrating, you're choosing very concretely what to take with you and what to leave behind in terms of values or what's in your suitcase. As a Desi teenager growing up here, especially if you're in a place where there aren't a lot of people like you kind of have to make that decision every single day and you don't ever feel like you're making the right one. But I would just emphasize that it's more your decision than anybody else's.
That's beautiful. And I'll just build on it. Zara, a lot of times it doesn't feel like that for a teenager. And I want all teenagers who might be listening to know that it is hard. There is a lot of commonality in your struggle that you face, depending on how open, practicing, conservative, liberal, socioeconomically wealthy, socioeconomically or financially disadvantaged your family is. You might think you don't have agency, but remember that you have a beautiful, beautiful opportunity in the making that probably you don't realize right now, in where you can take the best of both worlds and craft your own reality, because there is two cultures to choose from. And hopefully you'll make informed choices that really, really make your own personhood very rich, because there's richness in both sides. And you are not and cannot define yourself just by one of those, because you have, for all those of you who are being raised here and born here and have spent most of their formative years here, you have a bicultural identity. So it's really important to continue expanding your perspective, understanding intention versus impact when it comes to dealing with parents, learning the language to be able to effectively communicate with them. And hopefully we'll do another show on how to talk to Desi parents, Zara, maybe, because, hopefully will be helpful. So having said that, I think we'll wrap up for now. Thank you so much for talking with me, because I think that you bringing these issues up really brings a lot of relatability to the younger audiences and also their parents, to hear from your perspective what could be done differently, or what could be even noticed for an opportunity to do it differently. Thank you so much, everyone who's listening to this podcast or who sees the YouTube video. Remember to send your questions or topics to info@dilkirecipes.com. Check out the website. Hopefully, webinars and workshops are going to be on their way. And of course, the book Behind Closed Doors is available on Kindle as well as paperback format on Amazon. So you can order your copy. And Zara, thank you so, so much for being a part of this conversation. And I hope to see you again in one of my upcoming podcasts.
Thank you. I hope so too. There's a lot more to talk about.
I know, and I'm quite excited about it because it needs to be talked about. Very, very important. Everyone have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day, afternoon. Remember to do self-care. Remember to spend a few quiet moments with your cup of chai or latte or whatever it is that you enjoy, and think about life and things and what brings you joy. Take care and talk to you soon.